soft like flower do. Sure, I know that just them has a story.
Hi, I'm Effie Barker. We are right here in downtown. When you say we're not going away with these issues, what are those issues? Good evening. Welcome to the special edition of I'm Effie Barker. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in. Hello, Great Britain. Hello, world. Welcome to Effie Barker Human Interest. I'm your host, Effie Barker. I am a Filipino-American immigrant and I'm married to an Englishman. I moved here in the UK in 2019 and now living in Portsmouth in Hampshire with our 4-year-old daughter. I am a former TV host and reporter in Los Angeles, California. And as an American immigrant myself, I have always been passionate about the journey and the sacrifices that the immigrants had to go through in order to settle in a new country. And I know that there are so many little things that many people know little about, the challenges that we immigrants had to hurdle. And I'd like to delve on the life of the immigrants here in the UK. And to some who start to have a family, the challenges are insurmountable and can be overwhelming. Most women had to deal with not only with the physical changes after birth while looking after the baby. And we often get stuck allowing the problem to compound upon ourselves until we believe that a solution is hopeless. Now, the show Effie Barker Human Interest stems from my own personal journey as an immigrant. I'd like to use this platform to be the voice of not only with the immigrants, but to everyone who feel the need to be heard. And I want to delve into the daily life, the ups and downs, the joys and sorrows, the triumphs and failures of being an immigrant here in the UK. And it is my desire that people will have a full grasp of the life of the immigrants and to inspire to be more compassionate and understanding. Right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, all, wherever you are in the world. Welcome. Wow, what an exciting day today because I will be talking to an American immigrant who is originally from Michigan in USA. She moved here in the UK in September 2018 and now living in Leeds with her husband. And she is here with us today. And we are delighted that she will share with us her life here in the UK as an American immigrant. Let us all welcome Helen Groothuis Dubbelman. Hello, Helen. Hello and welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. And I'm very grateful that you share your time with us to share your story. First off, please tell us something about yourself. Where did you come from? Why are you here?
My parents owned a local food delivery business. Where I'm from, it's a very small town. Local products are very popular. Everybody makes their own jams and salsas and what have you. And so we were sort of the in between to get those foods into the various local markets. My dad had basically been doing that job for another company up until I was in high school, and it just so happened that somebody retired and was willing to sell their business, and it worked out. And I'm very proud of my dad. I think it's a big success story to be able to get your own business in your 40s. I think because there's always the narrative of like needing to succeed right away out of high school. So I guess that makes me a little bit of a nepo baby working for them.
You work for them. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a job I would have ever foreseen myself um, doing. And especially now having an autism diagnosis, in hindsight, I'm kind of surprised at that I had the ability to do something like that, because that is
Yeah.
a very social job.
Yeah.
But it's also peaceful because you get long drives to listen to whatever you want to cool down in between interactions.
Yeah, so your idea of coming to the UK, I know you were Anglified. So was that already the table at a young age that you would probably moved here, or did just the opportunity just came?
It just came. I think I always knew I wanted to visit. We weren't the most well off family. And so, like, trips were always like a special thing. And the fact that I was able to afford to do a semester abroad through my college was kind of a miracle in and of itself. Um, and I didn't know that I would immediately like click with this place when I came over here. I had an inkling of like, okay, I get to like see places that I've always like dreamed of seeing, but I kind of thought that would be it. And
Mm-hmm.
then I made some incredible friends through not only through the group that I went with, it was a group of about 20 of us from my college and a professor that came over, but also the friends that I met here. In fact, I'm actually supposed to meet one of them next week for coffee, like 8 years later. Um, and then it just so happened that during that time, I met my husband.
Mm.
I was not planning on like meeting or falling in love with or dating someone while I was over here. It just sort of happened, and we were
Mm-hmm.
friends for a while before we even decided to start dating. I don't think we started dating until like 4 months after I came home because I was like, I don't want the heartbreak. So like a lot of um kids my age, I'm in my late 20s. We grew up on a steady diet of British media in the early aughts. Think Harry Potter, think the Narnia films, and then a bit later on, the British music invasion of One Direction, Adele, etc. So I've always sort of been a bit of an Anglophile, and that led me to do a semester abroad in New York in 2016. And I absolutely just fell in love with the UK. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. I'd lived in more or less the same place since I was born, basically. And it just so happened that on that trip, I met the person that would become my spouse. And I came back after that semester to complete my degree. And I knew I wanted to get a master's in screenwriting. It ended up being that I was able to secure a place at film school in London in September 2018. So after 2 years in a long distance relationship, my then partner and I were able to live together full time. And I've been here ever since. Um, and yeah, I've just come to love it so much, and I've never contemplated moving back. It's my home now.
Nice, nice. So you came here as a student then.
Yep, I came here on what was then known as a Tier 4 student visa in 2018, and that covered my year of study for my master's degree. And during that time, my partner proposed, and we got married in September 2019. And at that point, I switched to a spouse partner visa. Um, so that allowed me to stay here for 2.5 years. I renewed in 2022 for another 2.5 years, which is going to be up towards the end of this year. So at this point, I'm planning on applying for indefinite leave to remain, and I'm already working on all the the big parts of that application. I've just passed my life in the UK test, which I'm very proud of. And yeah, I can't believe I've been here this long. Actually, the 5 year mark just seems so far off, and now it's almost here. So, a bit of background about me. I, for the most of my adult life, I sort of knew I was undiagnosed autistic. I actually just got officially diagnosed at the end of 2023, but had been long suspected. Um, so the school part of it was very interesting because as an autistic person, I do find it hard to make those connections at first, especially, even having, been to the UK before and obviously coming here, already knowing my now husband. At that point, it was still hard to sort of make friends in that scenario, especially because I was doing a screenwriting degree, and a lot of that field is about networking and meeting new people, and it's very exhausting as an autistic person because we don't have as high of a social battery per se as neurotypical people. And that sort of held me back a little bit. There was also the small matter of being on a Tier 4 student visa that I wasn't allowed to work during that time, except for work placement, which my program did not offer. So basically, what happened before I came over is I worked full time as a delivery driver for a year and a half before then, and putting enough money away to last the entire year. And I had to be very, very frugal during that time. So it meant saying no to a lot of social activities because we were in London, and London is very expensive, as we all know. And yeah, it was a fulfilling year and creatively. I did a screenplay that I'm very, very proud of, and have actually started to revisit again to pitch. Um, but at the same time, in terms of actual career opportunities afterwards, I did initially try to switch to a work visa to apply for places that would be able to employ me, but there just wasn't really anything available. And it wasn't necessarily a case of just getting married to stay over here, although that was part of it. By the time we got married, we had been in a relationship for 3 years, and like had known for a while that we wanted to get married, which is, I think, a lot of, I think it's a misconception that a lot of British people have, that people just come over here to get married. And not that it's not a valid excuse, but I feel like people just think that we do this on a whim just because we want to live here. But no, we do have this, you know, when you meet someone and you know they're the one, they're your person. Especially for me being an autistic person, because I have to know someone really well before I consider, having them in my close friend group, let alone in a relationship. So to, I mean, I've vetted my partner very carefully. I'll say that much.
So how was the transition of, well, first of all, as a student, how difficult is it? Is it easy? How was the process? And then on to the transition to the spouse.
The spouse visa transition was a bit tough because it's huge. Obviously, it's been in the news recently because the income requirement in order to bring your spouse to the UK has just risen sharply. But still, at that point, we just had my husband's income to go off of, and luckily, it was enough to be able to sponsor me at that point.
Do you
Um,
know offhand how much did it jump to now, the requirements?
so at this point for a spouse visa, it was announced back in, I think, October, November. The Home Secretary, they said they were going to raise it to uh, £38,000 per year. Um, in
It's
order,
almost like impossible. I mean, my
yeah,
husband works for the
yeah,
government, but I don't think he could make that much.
yeah. I mean, the median income for just any British person, you know, let alone immigrants, is £35,000. So they're expecting immigrants to be able to earn more than that in order to be able to stay. Um, and luckily they've it's still hiked, but they've now lowered that amount to £29,000, and that is set to go into effect from April. But that has left myself and a lot of other um, women who are here in the UK on spouse visas a bit shook, to say the least. Luckily, my partner and I are in a situation where our combined income clears that number no problem, but it, it, it it's very frustrating, especially because there just seems to have been no thought put into it yet. So
Hmm. In terms of the process and the documents that they required, how much was it and how difficult was it?
ooh, I wish I could go up to my office and grab the like entire like binders I have for each of my spouse visa applications, because it is a lot of paperwork. Um, they want evidence that you've been living together for 2 years, or in the case of my first spouse visa, we had only been living together for a year, so we had to provide substantial enough information that we had visited each other a certain amount of times, basically to prove our relationship was real. So that included anything from photos of each other on Instagram. And I did actually end up screenshotting on Instagram because I don't know if they do at that, but at that point you could see the date on it as well, publicly available. So that was sort of proof. We needed evidence of shared bills, such as a tenancy agreement, bank statements, basically a lot of different things showing that we lived at the same address. The income requirement that I mentioned earlier, and it's a lot of paperwork to go through. And you can submit these all online, but and a lot of people do choose to go to a solicitor to seek advice, which is another cost on top of it. And the cost of the visa itself is one of the hardest parts because it's not cheap. On top of the stated visa cost, which on the website for a spouse visa says it's about £1,000. Well, you add the immigration health surcharge on that, which is another £1,000, and they list it as separate, but you can't not pay it unless you have a really really valid excuse. Um, and they do have free appointments to get your fingerprints taken, but those get snapped up, so then that's a paid thing. A lot of the burden for me mostly was financial because it meant, having to scrounge up £2,000 out of somewhere. So as an example of how that's continuing to affect me, so my most recent visa renewal was in April of 2022, and I couldn't really rest on my laurels with that because I knew that the next step was going to be another £2,500 in 2.5 years. And so immediately from that point, I said, like, okay, I've done this step, and now I need to put aside 80 to 90 quid a month to go towards this far off thing that's going to have to happen. And of course, they raised the price for indefinite leave to remain from £2,400 to £2,900 last October, which meant I had to recalculate a little bit. But it means that there's a certain financial freedom that non-immigrants, on the whole, tend to have, or thing that they don't have to think about that we do.
Right. Well, before you came here, when you were a student, did you research about UK? Did you know enough about UK? And did it met your expectation?
So just by sort of cultural osmosis, there were things that I knew about. Obviously, like, there's a lot of British television and movies that make it over to the US. And as I say, in the early 2010s, there was a bit of a cultural osmosis. I was a big One Direction fan, praying for a reunion someday. But in a more practical sense, part of the semester abroad, they didn't want us to treat it as a tourist opportunity. They wanted us to really get to know the culture of the UK and to really ingratiate ourselves in and learn and sort of be among the people, if you will. So before we even came over, they put us through like a 3-week sort of crash course on British history and culture and food and sports, and we had to learn the monarchs as such. Honestly, it felt, as I was taking my life in the UK test the other week, I was just like, so much of what I knew had to study for this test was things that I learned 8 years ago during that course. So I'm really glad that they took that approach, because we weren't just here to be the, I hate stereotypes, but like the stereotypical kind of like rude American tourist. We were really there to sort of embrace the culture that we were about to be a part of for 4 months.
But are we really? You think are we the rude American tourists? You say?
I know some people who think we are, and certainly there are some. Put it this way: rude tourism knows no nationality.
Right. There could be also rude who are not tourists.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So you say that your experience is the same as what you've expected.
I think so.
Mm.
It's same as what I expected, and then like things that I wouldn't have expected to know about, like, or things that I wouldn't have expected to recognize as a difference.
Mm.
Um, so like I grew up in a pretty religious household, although I don't identify as such much anymore. And so there was a bit of a culture shock of going from a Christian college where we weren't allowed to drink on campus to a UK college campus that was ostensibly a Christian campus but had a pub. And
Mm.
part of that is the drinking age difference as well. But um, just little things that I would notice.
Mm. But if there's any adjustments, what adjustments did you have? or any challenges?
I think purely from an autistic standpoint, change in general is quite difficult. So the change from elementary to middle school to high school, and so on. Any big life change is always is difficult. I think it was difficult to come over here, and especially when I came over here permanently, because that was with the knowledge that I was leaving a life that I had known for 20 years and felt comfortable in, and to do something new. And my mom has been like my person my entire life, and she's the one who knows me best. And being having to leave her was a bit difficult. But at the same time, I knew that I wasn't going to find the satisfaction that I wanted as an adult back home. And I knew that my new person, my partner, was gonna help me and take care of me, and I trusted them. And it was a change that I wanted to make, as opposed to like being forced to go from a really small middle school to a really big high school. And I think that really helped. Although I did cry the first night I moved over here. I was just a bit overwhelmed.
All right. What kind could you tell me about the biggest difference of between your life before you came here, your life in the US and your life here?
Mm. I mean, there's the ones that people always point out. The NHS versus the U.S. healthcare system, the public transport. Um, you know what? Actually, yeah, I would talk about public transport, because obviously, back home I was a delivery driver, and you get your driver's license when you're like 16, and then I came over here, and I don't know. I don't think I would be able to go back without like the sort of public transport that we have here. Honestly. It's I know it's the thing that everybody talks about, but I just like I don't know. Something about it.
Yeah. So talking about the life that you had back there, and being your mother is your go-to person, and the changes and the differences in your life in there. And you mentioned a little bit earlier about the challenges in getting your residency here, the finances. Was there a point that, including the life that you had when you initially arrived here as a student and your life as a student, and at the time that you process your permanent residency, was there a point there that you just couldn't cope and it was too much and you wanted to give up and like I I don't want to do this?
I think especially when I'm in like the thick of the visa application process,
Mm-hmm.
each of the times that I've done it, it just seems like so daunting of a task. And especially for me, because things like that seem so hard, and the fact that a lot of it is worded so confusingly as well, and the stakes are so high. When I get stressed, I I tend to go into a sort of state of autistic meltdown. I'll cry, I'll not want to do anything. There's executive dysfunction there. And I just think, like, how am I gonna, get over this mountain? And then I just sort of think of the things that I would be giving up by going back. I think it would be difficult, you know, as difficult as it was for me to come over here to be with my husband. If I went home, it would be the other way around
Mm-hmm.
for him. And there's also the fact that, you know, I know why I left, and it just felt like the right thing to do. And there's definitely been some moments of struggle. Sometimes I think of like you hear about, things happening in politics and in the world, and I just think, oh well, it's kind of a mess on both sides of the pond. um but I just think, you know the I, I've become too ingrained in the culture to want to give it up. I know whenever I talk about like going home to see my parents, but at the same time, that place has changed so much without me, and I don't feel like I'm a part of it anymore.
Mhm.
And I just feel like the person that I am today, it's worth going through all of it, even if it
Mhm.
is tough. And it's wonderful having a support system. My partner's been super supportive, so supportive. He's held me a lot of times when it's been tough. And especially the way, tech right now, like the fact that my mom is only a phone call away and I can talk to her about it is
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
absolutely a relief.
So you never really thought of giving up, even though there were times that it was difficult.
Yeah. Um
Although you
Sometimes you
cried, you
just kind of
said,
got to get through it, and you got to get through it and then it's done.
right.
So, it's waiting on the other side.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that you were Anglophile. Did you ever have a prior connection before moving here, or no?
No, like I didn't have any family connection. Honestly, the large portion of my family is the Dutch diaspora in West
Mm,
Michigan,
yeah,
um, which is why we have such lovely last names to pronounce.
yeah.
Um,
I
so
was, yeah.
I don't, yeah. One of my goals being over here, that I've always wanted to, and it's just not happened yet, is I've never been to the Netherlands, and I would love to go. My grandpa, before he passed away, bless him, um, his activity in retirement was tracing our ancestry, and so he found some of our distant relatives and where the village that we came from, essentially.
Mm.
Um,
Was it in
so that's
Amsterdam
one of
or in Holland?
it's in Groningen in North Netherlands.
I see. Mm.
So that's
Just
one of my great goals, is to be able to go
get a
and to
ticket.
see.
It's just right there. Been,
I could take the ferry from Hull to Rotterdam,
right.
but no, I
Yeah.
don't. Again, like things I would do if I didn't have to spend so much money on a visa.
Yeah.
Right. When we get back, Helen will talk more about her experiences here in the UK, and she'll also talk about her thoughts about the immigration process, only here on Loved Beat Radio, LDBR.